So, how I doubled my salary in only 3 years. Pretty intriguing, right? And I bet you thought she's going to show us some sort of elaborate process that she came up with to double her salary in 3 years. But quite the contrary. The things that I did to see dramatic increases in my salary are things that you can do, things that anyone can do. So I promised you that I was going to show you my actual salaries. That's true, and I'm not going to keep you waiting. Let's take a look at the numbers. So this chart shows my starting salaries from 2017 to 2022. 2017 is when I began my career as an Angular developer, and 2022 is my most recent starting salary. Starting in May 2019, there is a steady increase in my starting salaries from one job to the next. What I'm going to be showing you are the things that I did and that I did consistently, so much so that I call them the rules. I'm going to be showing you that when I stuck to the rules from May 2019 to 2022, a 3-year span, my salary actually doubled. And that's the big outcome. The smaller outcomes is that when I applied the rules from one job to the next, I saw an increase in my salary. And that's important to note because each of the incremental increases are just as important as the overall increase. And from 2018 to May 2019, we see a decrease in my salary. That's important to the story as well, because that occurred when I didn't adhere to the rules. One thing I'd like to mention is that my first 4 jobs were all consulting roles, contract roles, and these last 2 jobs are full-time employee roles. Here's the thing that I really want you to take away in looking at this chart. It's not so much the salaries themselves. The thing that I want you to take away is that there are things that we can do to impact our earnings in whatever amounts they may be. So the big takeaway should be not the amount of change, but the ability to change. So now that you've seen the numbers, let's get into the actual rules. Before we delve into each individual rule, let's take a look at what all of the rules are and get an overview of each one. And notice, all of these rules are verbs. And they're verbs because these are things that you have to consistently do to see your salary increase over time. The first rule, negotiate. In this rule, we're not going to talk about how to negotiate. We're going to talk about probably the most important aspect of negotiating, and that's leverage. Rule 2, shop around. This rule is probably a little self-explanatory, but I'm going to show you how this is a very important action to take in growing your salary. Interview effectively. You're probably thinking that I'm going to discuss how to go in and really kill an interview and answer all the interviewer's questions correctly. Not at all. I'm going to show you how to ask the right questions during an interview. And by right questions, I mean the type of questions that can help you determine what kind of leverage you have in a given interviewing situation. Self-promote. I am a shameless self-promoter and it served me well. I'm going to give you some ideas on self-promoting and how to use it to your best advantage. Should you ever meet me in an interview situation, I guarantee you, before we even shake hands, you'll already know what I'm great at. And speaking of great, the last rule, upskill. I call upskill the golden rule. And I call it the golden rule because this is the rule that took my salary out of the average range into the well above average range. You saw the chart, you saw the numbers. My last 3 starting salaries are well above average, and it's due mainly to upskilling. So now that you know the rules, let's go and take a look at each one in detail. Starting with negotiate. Negotiate. If you're not negotiating for the salary you want to have, you're getting the salary that someone else wants you to have. And I know that negotiating can be a difficult subject. and it tends to make people uncomfortable. But what I found was the first time I negotiated, it was much easier every time after. And here's something to bear in mind. Here's some interesting facts about negotiating. 73% of employers are actually willing to and even anticipate negotiating initial salary offers. 55% of candidates don't negotiate. Of those candidates who do negotiate, they often see a significant increase in their starting pay. So, what this all means is that negotiating is your golden opportunity to make significant change in your salary. When you consider negotiating, you have to consider your leverage. That is, the things that you possess that merit the increase that you're requesting. And these include, of course, your skills and experience, your leadership skills and willingness to mentor, your ability to solve problems that are occurring in the project you're interviewing for, and also your ability to meet an urgent need that the employer is experiencing. And I bring up this last point because going back to my salary chart, this explains the significant increase in my contract role for 2018. In 2018, I had been an Angular developer for only 1 year. In this role, the hiring manager had an urgent need to replace someone who was going out on paternity leave, but it was a short-term contract for about 3 months, and the person who took the role really needed to step in and be productive because there was also an upcoming deliverable of a bunch of features that the users were expecting. So in this particular case, my leverage was my ability to come in for a short period of time and be productive and help make good on the team's deliverable. After the interview, when I took everything into consideration, I felt that what they were requiring merited a much higher contract rate than they were offering. So I negotiated for 40% more than their initial offer. And in fact, they accepted the higher rate that I negotiated for. These are all types of leverage. And these are the types of things that make up a good argument for you requesting a higher starting salary. The next rule is to shop around. And I think this is the rule that most of us tend to overlook, and we overlook it when we are very comfortable with our current state. And I got to tell you, it was this rule that taught me a very valuable lesson. The thing about shopping around is that there are definitely going to be times in your career when employers will seek you out. But at other times, you'll be the one doing the seeking. So it's always good to keep an eye out for your next best opportunity. And that doesn't mean that you're unhappy with or dissatisfied with your current situation. What you're doing is you're looking to improve your situation. And those are two totally different things. And you can make really good strides in increasing your salary and any other benefits that are meaningful to you, such as paid time off or better health care or 401k match. And you've probably all heard the phrase, the best time to look for a job is when you have a job. And of course, that's because you tend to have better outcomes when there's no sense of urgency in your search. And I really did learn this lesson going back to my salary chart. Remember that short-term contract role that I took in 2018? Well, look at my next role in May 2019. It's at a significantly lower rate. And that's because instead of beginning my job search while I was doing the short-term contract, I didn't begin my job search until after the contract had ended. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't totally under the gun to find my next role, but it did take me quite some time. And it wasn't exactly in the salary range that I was hoping for. Another really good time to shop around when you have a job is when there are layoffs going on in your current company because, again, you have better outcomes when there's no sense of urgency. You have more time to search for something that offers either an increase in salary or, at the very least, the same salary that you're getting. And remember, by not having to take a job with a lower salary, in the end, that's really a positive. My next rule is you have to interview effectively. And by that, I'm not referring to your ability to answer questions. I'm referring to your ability to ask questions. You have to learn to ask questions, relevant questions, to help you determine what leverage you might have. For instance, you want to determine if the project is having any issues or problems that you have the skills to help solve. And you have to ask the right questions to determine this. Because in reality, in an interview situation, no one's really going to discuss their weaknesses or problems, not the interviewee nor the interviewer. So you have to become adept at asking questions to help you glean this type of information. These are some of my favorite questions to ask during the interview. And by interview, this can be the first round phone screen as well as the face-to-face interview. So some of the questions that I like to ask: how old is the project? And how many users of the application? Because this tells me a lot. The thing that I've found out about Angular applications after working with them for so many years is that as they grow bigger, as they grow older, they tend to have issues. And by issues, I mean bugs. By issues, I mean tech debt. As the project gets closer to 2 years, and this is probably true for any software. When an application is small and it has a small number of users, it tends to have fewer features. So smaller, newer applications tend to have fewer issues. The more users of an application, typically the more features it has, and therefore the more code it has, and of course, the more issues it has. How big is the team? I ask this question for two reasons. One, if a team is really big, and by big, I mean over 5 developers, think about it. The more money being spent on that particular project. And whenever possible, you want to be working on a project that has a big budget. The other reason that I ask how big is the team is because the more developers on a project, guess what? The more issues the project tends to have. And that's because on big teams, you tend to have developers of all skill level, of varying experience, of varying programming styles. All that contributes to creating projects that have problems. Now, why am I harping on the project having problems? Well, again, you're looking for leverage. And with software development, like with anything, people will pay more to have their problems solved than they do for fulfilling the everyday tasks. So it's important that you understand, that you glean whatever issues are going on with the application. I tend to ask everyone how long they've been with the team because it's very common to have teams where the turnover can be quite high, particularly if they're big teams. And again, high turnover in personnel tends to contribute to issues with the project. I also like to ask how long the team members have been working with that given tech stack, particularly with Angular. And I've been on teams where many of the developers, it's their first time working with Angular. And if you're interviewing for a role in which many of the developers are novice developers and you're a more seasoned Angular developer, well, then you can really sell your skills as a leader and a mentor and as someone who's willing to share knowledge. And remember from our discussion in the negotiate rule, this is a type of leverage, and you can use this as part of your salary negotiations. The importance of great self-promoting can never be overstated. You don't get to an interview, and you certainly don't get to negotiate until your resume and or portfolio have captured the attention of someone. You need to create a resume that speaks loudly for you. Remember, your resume is the first thing that a hiring manager or a recruiter is seeing. And you really want that resume to not only state what you've done, the projects you've worked on, because let's face it, everybody does that. What you want your resume to convey is your area of expertise, where you can help a team out. And you really want to try to make an eye-catching resume as well, because software development involves a user interface, and a user interface should always look good. And you want to convey that you know how to make things look good. And the first place where you can do that is with your own resume. As I stated, I am a shameless self-promoter. Here's a copy of a resume that I created back in June of 2019. And this is the first page of that resume. And notice what half of the resume is referring to. It's telling the reader verbatim that I'm an Angular subject matter expert. And I created this resume in the style of sort of a Q&A, where if this is your particular challenge, I've got the solution. I have absolutely no trouble admitting that I am a shameless self-promoter. And this resume actually ended up working for me. I first used that resume to apply for the job that I got in October 2019. And this particular project had a lot of issues with RxJS and its asynchronous code. And during my final round interview, there must have been at least 15 people. Some were attending via conference call and others were in person. But the interviewers were really grilling me on my knowledge of RxJS. But here's the thing. Prior to that in-person interview, I'm pretty sure my resume had already spoken for me, because in it I addressed that very issue and how I was capable of solving it, particularly through the use of RxJS. Now, you don't have to be as shameless as I am in creating your resume, but again, it's really important to let your resume speak for you, and even more so, speak for you in terms of what you're really good at. Because if you leave these types of things out of your resume and you wait for the interview to begin telling your story, well, you're kind of leaving it to chance that your resume could end up on the reject pile. So to avoid having that happen, let your resume speak for you as loudly as it can. Here's the format that I use for my current resume. And what I always try to do is let the reader know the tech stack for each job that I worked on. And as you can see, I try to do it in a colorful and eye-catching manner. Again, it's very easy to say that you have experience in user interface design, but if you have a well-designed resume, you're kind of confirming that fact. If there's any advice that I can offer when creating an online portfolio, definitely make sure that it's responsive, because unlike a resume, people are going to view your portfolio on their phones, and you want to make sure that it's good on all devices. And if it doesn't, that tells a story about you as a developer that you really don't want to be told. I told you in the rules overview that I consider upskilling to be the golden rule. And that's because when you upskill and expand your knowledge of one or two areas of Angular, you can then really take your earning potential to a whole new level. When you choose an area of expertise, you want to try to find one where the average Angular developer is not that proficient. And you also want to choose an area where there tend to be known issues and problems in creating applications. Because remember, People pay more to solve problems. Some of the areas that you might want to consider include RxJS, CSS and SAS, and NGRX. A couple of years into my Angular career, I chose to become a subject matter expert in RxJS and CSS and SAS. And this has had an extremely positive impact on my earning potential. The job that I got in 2022, the company's recruiter had been recruiting me since mid-2021. And actually, I had done an initial technical interview with one of the company's managers. And that person was really impressed with my knowledge of RxJS. And I did a coding challenge, and it was really the coding challenge that I completed during that interview that impressed that particular manager. But after that first round interview, I elected not to proceed with the interview process because at that time, and this is in mid 2021, remember we were still in the throes of COVID and I was having a major renovation being done on my house. So I really wasn't in a good headspace to take on a new job. So I informed the recruiter that maybe I try again next year to join the firm. And I was really surprised in that the recruiter kept in touch with me all through the rest of 2021 and at the top of 2022. And I gotta tell you, it was really flattering to be pursued by a company. So by April 2022, I felt that I was ready to take on a new role. So I started the interview process again. And because the first manager was no longer with the company, I had to do another technical interview with another manager. And that manager was really impressed as well with my knowledge of RxJS. So then I moved forward with the final round interview with the director of the Eastern US region. Needless to say, the entire process turned out to be a positive one, and I joined the firm. And here's the other really wonderful part about this story is that not only was I recruited by this company for over a year, when it came time to talk about salary, I wasn't given a salary offer. What I was asked was what salary I wanted. So I didn't have to negotiate from their starting offer. The salary talks started at what I felt the job was worth to me. And as you can see, my number was $237,000. And to my surprise, I got an immediate yes to my request. Because becoming a subject matter expert in RxJS became such a game changer in my career, I felt the need to share my knowledge of RxJS. And at the top of this year, in 2024, I created my first online course. And that course teaches students RxJS from the beginning level to the more advanced level. And so far, the course has gotten really great reviews. And if you're interested in taking the course, I've included a link in the description of this video. And I'm currently working on a course which teaches my other area of expertise, CSS and SAS, and using those technologies in Angular. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified when that new course is available. But even if you choose not to upskill in either RxJS or CSS and SAS, do know that becoming proficient in some area of Angular will only have a positive impact on your career and your earning potential. So there you have it. Those are all the rules. Those are the actions that I took to double my salary in 3 years. And if you choose to incorporate all or any of the rules into your career, I hope you experience just as much success as I did. And if you choose not to incorporate the rules, there is one action that I'd like all of you to take, and that's to know your worth. Many people, many highly educated, highly skilled people have found themselves drastically underpaid because they didn't know their worth and they didn't know the market value of their skill set. So I urge you to always keep abreast of the market value for your skills and your length of experience in your region so that you will always know your worth. Thank you so much for tuning into my video.